Hi there, it's Ian here, and you're watching Grumpy Opinions, the show where I'm going to tell you all about what I think of films, TV shows, games, and life in general. Let's get on with the show. Westworld is a show based on the old movie with the same name, and it's now in its third season where the robots are trying to escape and they're taking over the world. Episode 2, The Winter Line, starts off with Bernard. He's arriving back at the outskirts of the Westworld complex, and he gets in no bother. And after passing by a few old landmarks that are a bit familiar, he ends up in Ford's private wee den, and he gets distracted by that bit of wall where, he smashed Teresa's head in season 1. And it turns out there's a hidden door near there, and inside he finds a whole bunch of Bernard host bodies. And at the back it's Minnie Hemsworth, the security guy, and he's gone and shot himself, which is kind of surprising because he was fine last time we saw him. But anyway, shock away, it turns out he's also alive and a host. And another thing that was kind of hinted at last season. It turns out that his job was finished, so he shot himself because that was his program. Okay. Anyway, Bernard whips his brain bomb out and patches him up, and then they go to infiltrate the park because they're looking for Maeve. And they can't find her because even though her body's actually still there, they find her brain's been taken out and it's gone walkabout. So it's back to the offices again, and Bernard manages to patch himself into the machine so he can do a diagnostic, because apparently these ones are better than the ones he had back in the abattoir. And he finds a whole bunch of new info, and then Hemi has to beat up a whole bunch of security guards, but he doesn't kill them because he's a good guy. And eventually, though, they really do need to go because the alarms are going off, and it's bye-bye time for the park. And before they go, Bernard ends up reprogramming Minnie Hemsworth so to protect him, and then they head off to look for that weedy corporate guy that was there last week. Meanwhile, we catch up with Maeve, who's in Warworld. Yeah, that's what the World War II place is called. And she finds Hector, and he's like a resistance guy all helping her. And together they try and escape from all the Nazis, only to end up in a big firefight. And then Maeve realises that Hector isn't actually self-aware. He's actually just a real resistance guy, or that's his programming. So she ends up offing herself quickly, and she wakes up on the gurney in the park lab, and she sees a familiar face, and he's like, "Bye, Felicia." And then, once she's up and about, she sees the other guy, and he's like, "Get security." And then luckily they managed to get stopped by Sizemore, yeah, the writer dude. And it turns out that he wasn't actually dead after last season, which is kind of surprising if you remember what happened. Yeah, apparently he was only shot a whole bunch and it took a lot of surgeries, but now he's back and he still wants to help Maeve because he's a good guy. And he arranges to take her to the Forge and manages to access the super secret world where all the hosts escaped to last time. But when they get there, she points out that
I've never been here.
she never actually got to the Forge. That was Dolores. She actually died somewhere else and never actually saw where the place was or knew any of the information that he needs. And he kind of trips out and she realises that he's not actually real. He's a fake copy. In fact, all of this is fake, and not even like Westworld fake. This is all a massive computer simulation she's in. So the pair of them leg it upstairs so she can hack into the system because she's still good at that, and she realises that if she makes it do too much work, the whole thing crashes. And they end up contriving a situation where they manage to bring the whole thing to a juddering halt, and Maeve hacks her way back into the real world, and she manages to commandeer a robot to get her brain out of that facility. And despite it making a spirited attempt, it doesn't quite work out, and boom. But then she wakes up, and she's been all tarted up in fancy house and nice clothes, and she finds Vincent Cassell, and it turns out he's like some kind of per-brain, Eurotrash evil supervillain type guy. He's a part of this whole thing, and this upcoming war for the fate of humanity in the world, and he wants her to help him by killing Dolores. And she's like, haha, no, bye. But then she ends up freezing in place because he's not that stupid. And he says he's going to keep trying to convince her. End of episode. So what did I think? Well, this was a markedly different turn from last week in a lot of ways, and I feel like this is the show kind of saying goodbye to the legacy of the earlier seasons of the show. Because we had a wee stint in Warworld, which was kind of as cheesy and as silly as you expected, which, as I said, it was going to be very sort of video gamey, like some Wolfenstein or something of that ilk. And yeah, and at the same time, we had a bunch of cameos from returning faces, and it was really funny because you had those two guys who I said last week, aren't really important characters, so I didn't see why they would turn up, and yet they still did. And then also these two twerps showed up, which is actually a funny little cameo, because that's Dan and Dave, the guys who made Game of Thrones. So yeah, that's them turning up with a dragon, so that was just a little in-joke, because both shows are made by HBO. Anyway, I kind of liked that with the show, them going back to the park, even if it was only brief. But one thing I really liked about this episode was there was an awful lot of things in the first half of it that kind of had me rolling my eyes. And what I liked about it wasn't that it made me roll my eyes, but that it actually intended you to do that. Because it was kind of intentional stuff that was a bit too obvious. I'll give you an example of what I mean. It wasn't a surprise that Hector was in full World War mode, because you thought, right, okay, that was a bit strange. Or like how these two don't react to her. And it nags your brain, but you're thinking, right, something, this is all just a bit on the nose. And to be honest, I wouldn't really have expected this guy to be happy that Maeve was up and about and running, because basically, if you consider that she kind of kidnapped them in season two, and he nearly died like a whole bunch of times because of her and like various other people. Oh, I like how like Sizemore was cagey in the forge, and like how she freezes everybody, but you still see Sizemore blinking because he isn't frozen, and he does say that a minute later. It's just nice little touches. But you think her with her robot brain would have noticed that he was blinking. But anyway, I mean, it is a TV show, yeah. But I like the fact that it was giving audience just enough to let you realise before the characters did that something was wrong, but then still letting it come out just before it got too ridiculous. Because I was sitting there going, oh God, please don't be this obvious, please don't be this bad. And it wasn't, because it was trying to deliberately be bad. It was trying to deliberately have that level of separation between common sense and the real world, because it was all a simulation. And in some scenes, they really did push it to the limit. But yeah, I just kind of enjoyed that, because when it all happened, I was like, okay, I'm glad. That's not. I thought for a minute it was terrible, but actually it was just, trying to be a bit funny. And the Bernard story was interesting. I mean, it had a few little odd moments, like these two guys in the background turning around and walking away. I mean, that's got to mean something. I noticed that, didn't you? I mean, but nothing actually came of it at this point in the show. But what does that mean? Was Stubbs controlling them with his mind? They shouldn't be able to do that. I mean, it just seemed a bit strange. And I also like that Stubbs refused to kill any of the humans, because that's interesting, because Ford didn't seem to care about people dying. And last season, like most of the hosts didn't care about it, they were just killing everybody. But he very deliberately only fights these guys hand to hand and doesn't kill them. But like clearly these two are going to be the good guys going forward in the show. And I feel like these are sort of the Bronn and the Tyrion of Westworld now, having japes and adventures all over the place. But it's interesting that also that this episode spent the entire time here in the park, or in the simulation, rather than in the city with Dolores and Caleb. Because I mean, it's almost like it's saying, right, that was one group of people, one faction, and this is another, and the show's going to have these two meeting up later on at some point. On the other hand, even if we're building towards this kind of battle of the superheroes, and that'll be in the case, it's a little bit over the top. I mean, we've got Deadshot Dolores with all her access to vehicles and internets, and she can walk out and somehow manages bullets seem to just miss her by magic. And then we've got Maeve, who can control all forms of hacking and such, and are super intelligent. And both of these people are overpowered as hell. And that could make for an interesting show direction. This whole thing about these two massively powerful characters having their own sort of like mini war. I mean, again, I've drawn a few X-Men comparisons of this before between Magneto and Professor X, but yeah, I mean, I really think that's kind of where they're going with this. But then we've also got like Stubbs and Bernard, and it's clear that Dolores left some sort of thing in Bernard's code. So what is her secret plan? Because otherwise, why have him bother checking it and then getting stopped before he's finished? Because there's obviously something that they're building to there. They've got a lingering bit of mystery they're trying to do, and that's always been Bernard's character. I mean, let's face it. Bernard's entire thing in the show is getting used by other people and not actually knowing what's going on. He's constantly not sure like, if he's living in the past or in the moment, or if he's being remote controlled, or if he's been given orders that he's been told to forget. I mean, that's literally what he's all about. And then he gets sad about it and morose and has a bit of an existential crisis. And frankly, that's all getting a little bit tiring. Whereas Stubbs seems to just be this chonky muscle for hire guy and not a lot more. I mean, he's always been a very much a side character, and now he's basically like muscle to make sure that Bernard doesn't get hurt. And also, they turned up with like these dudes in Sizemore, but I don't think we're going to see them again. I mean, as they said, Sizemore definitely at this point got dead last season, for sure. They've explained that now. So it's a bit of a shame to like bring the actor in and only dangle him there just to snatch it away again, because he was actually quite likable this episode, as opposed to annoying in season one and then still annoying but slightly less so in season two. But it does feel like this is totally just a big cheerio to all of that and the park and everything, unless they end up bringing things back for the finale or something else. I mean, it wouldn't surprise me. But I think basically that's it for the park. And another thing, this whole episode is delving into the idea they brought up last week about everything being a giant simulation.
None of this is real. I'm serious.
And I doubt they're going to leave it at that either, because I mean, how real is real seems to be the entire point of this season. And I suspect that's what's going to be the case. I mean, we're 2 episodes in and still there's no sign of the man in black. And I wonder if he's going to be part of that as well, because last time we saw him, he was in like this lift to the future weird place. But also at the same time, you'd seen that he was on a gurney being rescued at the end. So is part of his brain in somewhere else? Is he having a nightmare? Is what's going on? We just don't know. And yeah, I mean, there was issues I had also with the idea of this simulation thing. As I said, it was kind of silly because we had this whole thing about there being different like layers of fake reality, and I think if the show goes too much into that, it'll definitely kill it. But there was also aspects of it where that felt tired as well. I mean, also, Maeve can crack her way out of like a computer program reality. She's a robot. I mean, she's basically a robot brain. So I can accept that's possible, but they put her in there knowing that she knew a bunch of stuff and they presumably knew that she had the power to do that. They must have records from like the complex or something. It all just seems a bit too easy that she can just still hack her way out. I mean, it's a bit too much like that episode of Star Trek where they say, "Oh, we've got the holodeck. Data wants to play Sherlock Holmes," and then they accidentally create an enemy that's able to defeat Data instead of saying an enemy that's able to defeat Data pretending to be Sherlock Holmes. That they end up like creating one that can literally just take over the entire ship from inside the holodeck. I mean, it's kind of bonkers that there isn't some kind of safety system. And it's kind of bonkers that she should be able to hack her way out of that for what should be a closed system. I mean, that's like playing a computer game and then the computer game being able to hack its way out of there and then, turn the central heating up and down. It just seems a bit bizarre. But overall, this week was actually pretty good. It was interesting and fun. Didn't really bother me much. And it might have been a little thin plot wise, but yeah, still, I mean, it's good entertainment for these trying times when we've all like got to sit about in isolation. So yeah, I mean, I hope everyone's keeping well. So as always, keep safe and stay home and get your one bit of mandated government exercise every day. Until next time, I've been Ian, and these have been my grumpy opinions.